Jack Johnson was born on March 31st, 1878. He was the third of 9 kids in a family that knew hardship inside out. His parents, Henry and Tina Johnson, were former slaves working as a janitor and dishwasher to keep things afloat. Henry, a Civil War veteran who served with the Union's 38th Colored Infantry, was once described by Jack as the most perfect physical specimen he'd ever seen, despite a withered leg from his wartime service. Jack's early years were a mix of struggle and simplicity. Frail as a boy, he only attended school for 5 years before diving into work like his siblings. Yet, life in Galveston's 12th Ward had an unusual twist. Segregation wasn't much of a factor. Everyone, black or white, faced the same grind of poverty. Jack grew up playing, eating, and even sleeping at the homes of his white friends, never feeling excluded. Reflecting on those days, he said, "Nobody ever taught me that white men were better than me." Jack's mother, Tina, was his backbone. She didn't tolerate weakness. One time, after Jack came home bruised and crying from school, Tina gave him an unforgettable ultimatum. If he got beaten up again, she'd give him worse at home. That lesson stuck. Jack never lost another schoolyard fight. Quitting school early, Jack hopped from job to job, working docks and even exercising horses at a Dallas racetrack. But it was while apprenticing under a carriage painter named Walter Lewis that he found his true calling. Lewis loved watching friends spar, and Jack couldn't resist joining in. From there, his boxing journey began. At just 16, Jack moved to New York City and lived with welterweight fighter Barbados Joe Walcott. He worked exercising horses until getting fired for tiring one out. Returning to Galveston, Jack took a janitor job at a local gym. With his savings, he bought a pair of boxing gloves and sparred whenever he could, learning the ropes through sheer determination. One of Jack's earliest fights was as raw as it gets. After being arrested for a street brawl with a man named Davy Pearson, the two squared off again at the docks, where Jack pummeled Pearson in front of a roaring crowd. Prize fighting was illegal in Texas. Jack won his first bout and pocketed $1.50. Jack Johnson's journey into the world of professional boxing began on November 1st, 1898, in his hometown of Galveston, Texas. In his debut fight, he took down Charlie Brooks with a knockout in the second round of a match billed for the Texas State middleweight title. It was the start of something extraordinary. By May 8th, 1899, Jack stepped into the ring with Klondike John W. Haynes, also known as the Black Hercules, a towering figure who called himself the Black Heavyweight Champ. Their first bout ended with Klondike winning via technical knockout in the 5th round. But Jack wasn't one to back down. They met again twice in 1900. One fight ended in a draw, but in their third encounter, Jack made Klondike quit in the 14th round. In 1901, Jack faced a major test against seasoned heavyweight Joe Koinski in Galveston. Koinski knocked him out in the 3rd round, but their bout led to both fighters being jailed since prize fighting was illegal in Texas. While locked up, they sparred in their jail cells, drawing large crowds to watch. Those 23 days behind bars turned into a masterclass for Jack, as Koinski saw potential in the young fighter and taught him the art of defense, famously saying, "A man who can move like you should never have to take a punch." Jack took those lessons to heart, and it showed. By October 21st, 1902, he defeated former black heavyweight champion Frank Childs in a 12th round TKO, ending Childs' claim to the title. Jack kept climbing, and on February 3rd, 1903, he captured the World Colored Heavyweight Championship in a 20-round battle against Denver Ed Martin. But Jack wasn't done making history. On December 26, 1908, in Sydney, Australia, he beat Tommy Burns to become the first African-American world heavyweight champion, a title that eclipsed his colored heavyweight crown. His reign lasted 2,151 days, cementing his place among the legends of boxing. During his time as champion, Johnson defended his titles against some of the best fighters of his era. He bested names like Sam McVeigh, Sam Langford, and Joe Jeanette, often dominating opponents who challenged his supremacy. Johnson fought Jeanette 7 times, winning 4 and drawing twice, though he avoided giving Langford a rematch when he was the world champ. Jack's incredible career saw him rise from local dockyards to global fame. Even in his later years, his spirit remained unshaken. At 67, Johnson stepped back into the ring for an exhibition match with 66-year-old Joe Jeanette at a war bond rally in 1945. It was a fitting reminder of a fighter who never backed down, no matter the odds. From jail cell sparring to world titles, Jack Johnson's legacy is a story of grit, determination, and unshakable confidence. Jack Johnson's climb to the world heavyweight title wasn't an easy road. It was a fight outside the ring as much as in it. At the time, champion James J. Jeffries refused to face Johnson, choosing retirement over a bout with the unstoppable challenger. Still, Johnson didn't back down. In July 1907, he made a statement by knocking out former champ Bob Fitzsimmons in just 2 rounds. Finally, on December 26, 1908, after 6 long years of chasing the top spot, Johnson made history. In Sydney, Australia, he faced Tommy Burns, the reigning world champion. Burns had avoided Johnson for 2 years, refusing to fight him until promoters waved a massive $30,000 purse in front of him. Over 20,000 fans packed into Sydney Stadium to witness the clash. For 14 brutal rounds, Johnson dominated Burns until the police stopped the fight, declaring Johnson the new heavyweight champion of the world. The aftermath was explosive. Johnson's victory rattled the racist foundations of the time, with public figures like author Jack London calling for a great white hope to reclaim the title. Newspapers buzzed with coverage, often dripping with prejudice. One New York Times editorial worried that a black champion might embolden African Americans and intensify racial tensions. As champion, Johnson faced wave after wave of white challengers, hyped by promoters as saviors of the sport. In 1909, he defeated Tony Ross, Al Kaufman, and even middleweight champion Stanley Ketchel. Johnson and Ketchel were friendly outside the ring, and their match started as a light exhibition, until Ketchel suddenly floored Johnson with a surprise punch in the 12th round. Furious, Johnson sprang up and unleashed his legendary uppercut, sending Ketchel to the canvas and knocking out his front teeth. Remarkably, Johnson later removed Ketchel's teeth from his glove, a moment immortalized on film. The biggest showdown came in 1910, when James J. Jeffries, the undefeated former champion, came out of retirement to challenge Johnson. Jeffries openly declared his intent to prove a white man is better than a Negro. The build-up to the fight was intense. Jeffries hadn't fought in 6 years and had to shed over 100 pounds to get into fighting shape. Promoters Tex Rickard and John Gleason seized the moment, securing a record-breaking purse of $101,000, over $3.4 million today. The fight was billed as the ultimate clash of races, a guaranteed spectacle that promised massive profits no matter who won. This wasn't just boxing. It was a social and cultural battleground, with Johnson standing tall as a symbol of defiance against racism and inequality. His journey to the top was more than a fight for a title. It was a fight for respect and recognition in a world determined to keep him down. As the world held its breath, the tension before the fight of the century was electric. James J. Jeffries stayed out of the spotlight, avoiding the media, while Jack Johnson basked in the attention, calm and confident. Legendary boxer John L. Sullivan observed the two and declared that Johnson's incredible physical condition gave him the edge. He'd only lose if he somehow failed to bring his skill to the ring. Jeffries tried to sound bold, promising to knock Johnson out quickly, while his wife quietly hoped it would be his last fight. Johnson, unshaken, simply said, "May the best man win." In the days leading up to the July 4th, 1910, showdown, the air was heavy with racial tension. To keep things in check, strict measures were enforced. No guns, no alcohol, no apples, or anything that could be turned into a weapon were allowed in the arena. Despite the chaos outside, inside the ring, the stakes were clear, with 10-7 odds favoring Jeffries. A custom-built ring in downtown Reno, Nevada, held a roaring crowd of 20,000 as the fight began. Jeffries, hoping to reclaim his glory, quickly realized he was outmatched. Johnson controlled the fight from the start, staying sharp and dominant. By the 15th round, Jeffries had been knocked down twice, a first in his career, and his corner threw in the towel, ending the match to spare him further humiliation. Johnson later said he knew the fight was over by the 4th round, when an uppercut left Jeffries looking defeated. "I knew what that look meant," Johnson recalled. The old ship was sinking. After the fight, a humbled Jeffries admitted, "I could never have whipped Johnson at my best. I couldn't have hit him. No, I couldn't have reached him in 1,000 years." Johnson's victory earned him $65,000, over $2.1 million today, and silenced critics who had dismissed his earlier win over Tommy Burns. Sullivan, a former champion himself, praised Johnson, saying he fought fairly and deserved every bit of his success. "The best man won," Sullivan declared. Johnson was crafty, powerful, and cunning, a master of the ring. That day, Johnson shattered barriers and cemented his legacy as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The fight of the century wasn't just about boxing. It was a moment that shook the world and proved once again that Jack Johnson was a force no one could ignore. The 4th of July, 1910, was more than just a day of celebration. It was the spark for chaos across the U.S. After Jack Johnson's victory over James J. Jeffries, race riots exploded in over 50 cities across 25 states. From New York to Texas, racial tensions boiled over, leaving at least 20 dead and hundreds injured. Johnson's win crushed the Great White Hope narrative, leaving many white Americans humiliated, while black communities celebrated the triumph as a step forward in racial progress. Black poet William Waring Cuney captured the joy of Johnson's victory in his poem, "My Lord, What a Morning." But the aftermath wasn't all celebration. The heavyweight champ, now the symbol of black excellence in the ring, controversially drew the color line himself. For years, Johnson refused to fight other black boxers like Sam Langford, Joe Jeanette, or Harry Wills, citing financial reasons. His decision angered many in the black community, who felt betrayed by their champion. Jeanette criticized Johnson, saying, "Jack forgot about his old friends after he became champion." When Johnson finally faced another black opponent in 1913, it wasn't Langford or Jeanette, but battling Jim Johnson, a lesser-known fighter. The match in Paris ended in controversy. Spectators, feeling cheated, demanded refunds, accusing both fighters of not putting on a real contest. Jack Johnson later claimed a broken arm during the fight, keeping his title despite the draw. 2 years later, on April 5, 1915, Johnson's reign came to an end in Havana, Cuba. Facing cowboy-turned-boxer Jess Willard in a grueling 45-round fight under the blazing sun, Johnson dominated early but wore down after the 20th round. In the 26th round, a crushing blow from Willard sent Johnson to the canvas. Rumors swirled afterward that Johnson had thrown the fight, but Willard dismissed the idea, saying, "If he was going to throw the fight, I wish he'd done it sooner." It was hotter than hell out there. After losing his title, Johnson's days as a champion were over. Though he continued to fight into his 60s, the glory days were long behind him. Financial struggles and the changing landscape of boxing led Johnson to underground fights in secret venues, far from the limelight. Johnson's final public appearance in the ring came in 1945 at age 67, during a benefit fight for U.S. war bonds. Even in his later years, Johnson's spirit and determination remained unshaken. His story was never just about boxing. It was a saga of triumph, controversy, and a relentless fight against the odds, both inside and outside the ring. Jack Johnson lived life at full throttle, breaking rules and challenging norms at every turn. He earned a fortune endorsing products, from patent medicines to fast cars, and indulged in flashy hobbies like racing and custom-tailored suits. Johnson once lost a race to champion driver Barney Oldfield, but didn't let it dampen his flair. When slapped with a $50 speeding ticket, he handed the officer $100, saying, "Keep the change. I'll be speeding on my way back." That was pure Jack Johnson. In 1920, he opened the Club Deluxe in Harlem, a hotspot that later became the iconic Cotton Club under gangster Owney Madden. But not everyone admired his flamboyant lifestyle. Black leader Booker T. Washington criticized Johnson for living extravagantly, claiming it hurt the progress of the African American community. Still, Johnson wasn't one to care about approval. He broke taboos left and right, flaunting relationships with white women and verbally taunting both black and white men in and out of the ring. When asked about his stamina, Johnson joked, "Eat jellied eels and think distant thoughts." Even outside boxing, Johnson stirred controversy. In Scotland, he tried joining the Freemasons in 1911, but faced backlash that led to his initiation being revoked. Back in the U.S., Johnson opened Café de Champion in Chicago, one of the first interracial nightclubs. His love life was as dramatic as his career. Though he claimed in his autobiography to have married Mary Austin, no record exists. His relationships included fiery romances, heartbreak, and scandal, with most of his wives being white. Tragedy struck in 1912 when his wife, Etta Duryea, died by suicide following a tumultuous marriage marked by Johnson's infidelity and the public's hostility to their interracial union. Johnson's defiance of racial boundaries caught the government's attention. He was twice charged under the Mann Act for allegedly transporting women across state lines for immoral purposes. The second case led to a conviction in 1913 by an all-white jury. Facing prison, Johnson fled the country, spending 7 years in exile across Europe, South America, and Mexico. Eventually, he returned to the U.S., served his sentence, and was released in 1921. Jack Johnson wasn't just a boxer. He was a master of the ring with a style that was all his own. He didn't just fight, he toyed with his opponents, making them dance to his tune. Johnson would usually strike first, but then he'd switch to defense, letting his rivals wear themselves out. Round by round, as they grew weaker, he turned up the heat, slowly taking control. Instead of rushing for a knockout, Johnson seemed to enjoy punishing his opponents over the course of the fight. He dodged their punches with ease, leaving them swinging at air, only to deliver sharp, calculated blows in return. Watching him fight was like seeing an artist at work. It looked so effortless, as if he wasn't even trying. But when the moment called for it, Johnson could unleash a powerful punch that left no doubts about his skill. In some fight footage, you can even spot him holding up a stumbling opponent, keeping them in the fight just so he could dominate them a little longer. Johnson's style wasn't just about winning. It was about making a statement. Johnson died in 1946 after a car crash near a segregated diner that had refused to serve him. He was buried in Chicago beside his first wife, Etta. Today, his grave bears a marker honoring him as the first black heavyweight champion of the world. A reminder of the man who fought both in and out of the ring to live life on his terms. Long after his death, Johnson's legacy stirred debates. Efforts to clear his name spanned decades, with figures like John McCain, Harry Reid, and Mike Tyson campaigning for a presidential pardon. In 2018, President Donald Trump finally granted Johnson a posthumous pardon, acknowledging the racial injustice behind his conviction.